What happens when someone always expects the worst has a clinical name: catastrophizing. A thinking pattern where the mind gets stuck on the most negative reading of a situation even when the evidence doesn't support it. Research links it to anxiety, depression, and even worse, chronic pain. What interests me is something broader than the clinical disorder. That quiet background noise that doesn't stop you from functioning day to day, but keeps humming underneath everything else. The tendency to assume things are more likely to fall apart than hold together. Not always, just a bit more often than you'd like. And this tendency isn't spread evenly. It concentrates in people who grew up in unpredictable environments. People who learned, not consciously, not intellectually, but somewhere below language, that the gap between okay and not okay can close without warning. That the absence of something bad isn't the same as safety. Your brain didn't arrive here from nowhere. It built this out of data. Now for the evolutionary part, and this is where it gets interesting. The human nervous system wasn't built for calm. It was built for survival in environments where threats were real and often fatal. And the most important skill for survival there wasn't the ability to enjoy life. It was the ability to spot a threat in time. Negative bias, the tendency to weigh potential negatives more heavily than equivalent positives, is one of the most replicated findings in human psychology. We remember bad experiences more clearly. We process threatening information faster. We react to a possible loss faster than to a possible gain. The ancestors who played out the worst-case scenario before heading into unfamiliar territory, who noticed the rustle in the grass half a second sooner, who stayed alert even when everything was quiet, survived more often. Some of the people who just assumed things would probably work out also survived. Some didn't. So the habit of expecting the worst isn't a personality flaw. It's an ancient function, calibrated over a very long time. The real question is why it's louder in some people than others. There are two answers here, and they don't cancel each other out. The first is genetic. Studies on the heritability of anxious traits, negative bias, threat sensitivity, pessimistic forecasting, put the genetic contribution somewhere around 30 to 50%. Some people are genuinely born with nervous systems that are more reactive to potential threat. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection sensor, runs at a higher baseline in them, and their reaction to ambiguity is stronger. This is something they arrived with, not something that happened to them. The second answer is about experience, and it's harder to sit with. Martin Seligman documented something called learned helplessness. In early experiments, animals exposed to unavoidable negative events eventually stopped trying to escape them, even once escape became possible. They learned, somewhere below conscious thought, that their actions didn't change the outcome. People do the same thing. When someone grows up somewhere bad things arrived unpredictably and their own efforts consistently didn't stop them, an unstable home, an early loss, the repeated experience of things falling apart no matter how hard they tried, the nervous system updates its assumptions. It learns to expect a bad outcome because that turned out to be the most accurate prediction in that particular context. The catastrophizing brain isn't broken, it's calibrated. It built a fairly accurate model of the world it learned in. The problem is that training data is out of date now. I want to name what this actually looks like day to day. Someone who's always waiting for the worst usually doesn't look like they're drowning. Most of the time they look fine. They function. But underneath that, there's this quiet monitoring system running constantly, scanning for signs that okay is about to end. Good news arrives, and there's this half-second delay before any relief while the nervous system double-checks. Is this real? Is there a catch? Does this good thing mean something else is quietly going wrong somewhere? Something ambiguous happens. A tone in someone's voice, a pause that's a beat too long, a small deviation from the usual pattern, and the mind runs straight to the worst explanation first. Not because it's the most likely one, but because that's already where the monitoring system is pointed. Here's what describes this most accurately. When a plan is going smoothly, the expectation that the other shoe is about to drop gets louder, not quieter.
In this nervous system's experience, a smooth stretch was often just the lead up to the moment it stopped being smooth. What's exhausting is that this isn't a choice. The nervous system runs whether you want it to or not, and trying to talk over it with positive thinking usually doesn't work because you're trying to speak louder than a system that reacts faster than any conscious thought. There's another mechanism worth understanding on its own: anticipatory anxiety. This is fear you feel not because of what's happening, but because of what could, and it behaves differently than reactive anxiety. Reactive anxiety responds to something real, a near miss, bad news, a sudden problem. The threat arrives, the system fires, the threat passes, and you come back down. Anticipatory anxiety doesn't have a real event to respond to. It responds to possibilities, to scenarios, to the space between now and the future that might theoretically contain something bad. Since that space never fully closes either, this kind of anxiety never fully goes away either. It just switches targets, finds the next bad outcome to start pre-processing. There's also intolerance of uncertainty at work here. The nervous system isn't comfortable holding, "I don't know what's going to happen." It would rather generate a prediction, even a bad one, than leave the question open. Oddly enough, a specific bad outcome is easier to carry than not knowing, because at least the brain knows what to prepare for. That's why "it'll probably be fine" rarely actually helps. Probably is still uncertainty, and the nervous system doesn't settle for probably. It wants a definite answer. If a definite good one isn't available, it'll take a definite bad one instead. What actually helps depends on how deep this sits. If it's mostly a cognitive habit you can catch yourself doing, cognitive behavioral therapy works reasonably well. The method is simple. Notice the catastrophic thought, look at the actual evidence, come up with an alternative explanation. Repeat until the habit shifts. Not dramatic, but the research on it holds up. If the catastrophizing developed through early calibration of the nervous system, through an environment that really was unpredictable, cognitive techniques alone usually aren't enough. This isn't a thought pattern, it's a physiological setting, a nervous system that learned to run in heightened alert and hasn't gotten enough stable evidence yet to bring that level down. What tends to work better in that case is accumulated experience of safety. Not being told you're safe, but being shown it, slowly, over time, through your environment and relationships. The nervous system updates slowly, but it does update. One thing that genuinely surprised me, just naming the process helps. Research on affect labeling shows that putting a feeling into words lowers the amygdala. The monitoring system, once it's noticed and named, quiets down a little. Not because the threat is gone, but because naming it moves the experience out of the subcortical threat system and into the prefrontal cortex, where you can actually work with it instead of just feeling it. Getting even a little relief from this doesn't require you to stop expecting the worst. It just takes noticing that you're doing it. Here's what I want to leave you with. Someone who always expects the worst isn't living in a cognitive error. They're living in a strategy that used to be accurate, one that formed in response to real information about how the world worked for them and just hasn't fully caught up to the present situation yet. Catastrophizing is a kind of loyalty. Loyalty to a version of the world where vigilance was genuinely justified, and to a younger version of yourself who needed to see the bad thing coming before it arrived. That version of you was trying to protect you, and it seems to have done a decent job, or you wouldn't be here now. The question worth sitting with isn't, "Why am I like this?" It's more like, is the world I'm still scanning for threats the same world I'm actually living in right now? For a lot of people who always expect the worst, the honest answer is no. The environment changed. The threat level dropped. The monitoring system just never got the update. The slow, real work is helping it finally see that. Tell me in the comments, do you recognize this in yourself? And if you do, does it feel more genetic, something that was always there, or learned, something that grew out of a specific experience? I'm genuinely curious which one it is for you.